Hey, how's it going? My name is Wes. Welcome back to another Spanish lesson. In today's lesson, we are going to look over the punctuation marks in the Spanish language. And today's lesson is a short lesson, but it's an important one to watch because we are going to go over the punctuation marks that we have seen in previous lessons. And we're going to see and understand why these are being used in the Spanish language and how we can use them ourselves. Alright, so punctuation marks. What are punctuation marks? How do they work? How do we use them in the Spanish language? Alright, let's move on to the first sentence. And this is one of the sentences that we learned, I think, in one of the first lessons that we did together.
¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás?
Now, as we saw before, in Spanish, we use the question mark at the end of the sentence. So, ¿cómo estás? As a question. But we also use this inverted or reversed question mark at the beginning of the sentence. So in the English language, you would just write, how are you? With a question mark at the end. But in Spanish, we always write the question mark at the beginning, inverted or reversed, and at the end. So we use two question marks. And the same thing goes for exclamation marks. For example, with this sentence, muy bien, very good.
Muy bien. Muy bien.
In English, we would just use one exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. However, in Spanish, we also use one at the beginning of the sentence. Again, inverted or reversed, however you want to call it. Now, if you're new to learning Spanish, this might be a bit confusing because you might ask yourself, why would you use two question or exclamation marks if you can just use one, like the English language? And there's actually an easy explanation why the Spanish language uses two punctuation marks instead of just one like English. And that is because these double marks are actually used to make it easier to understand and to show how a sentence is meant to be interpreted. So for example, if you look at this sentence, ¿Vienes a la fiesta mañana? Are you coming to the party tomorrow? Then again, we see this inverted question mark at the beginning also. But now just for a moment, imagine that you are reading this and you see the inverted question mark at the beginning of the sentence. Then already right from the start, you know that this sentence is going to be a question, just because you see that little inverted question mark right at the beginning. If you would read this in English, are you coming to the party tomorrow? Then, of course, by looking at are you can suggest that it's going to be a question, but it's only really until you read the full sentence that you see the question mark, and then you can figure out, okay, this is a question. So these inverted question marks and exclamation marks and punctuation marks, as we call them, in Spanish they are used to make our lives easier, so that right from the beginning you can tell that this sentence is going to be a question. So that's one reason why in Spanish we use these inverted punctuation marks. Now that's not the only reason why we use them. There's one more thing which is actually quite important for you to know, which is that in Spanish, when we form a question, we do not always change the structure of a sentence, unlike in English. So for example, in this example, when we say está bien, we are actually saying it is okay. So está, it is, bien, okay. But now if we turn this into a question, we simply just add the question marks at the beginning and at the end. So está bien, it is okay, turns into está bien, is it okay? And the big difference here is that in English you would say it is okay, but if you would want to ask the question, is it okay, you would simply flip it and is, flip them around. So instead of saying it is okay, you would say is it okay. So in the English language, we actually flip the words around to create a question sentence. In Spanish, we don't do this. We just add the question marks. So the same sentence, the same structure of the sentence can mean different things depending on the kind of marks that we use. So that's why it's so important to use these marks, because as a non-native Spanish speaker and writer, we are not used to using double question marks or exclamation marks. And honestly, it's quite frustrating at the beginning, because now you have to add an extra step to your writing process. But it is actually super important that you do use these inverted marks as well, if you want to properly grammatically correct or write in Spanish and to be understood if you write something in Spanish. So if you're speaking in Spanish, these punctuation marks might not be that important, but if you read and write in Spanish, these are actually pretty important to understand and to use. And that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about in this lesson. Again, it's a very short lesson, but it's an important one to understand. So I hope that this made sense to you. If you have any questions, please let me know. And from now on, please make sure, not for me, but for yourself, to write these punctuation marks, because it will help you in the long run. Because with many things in life, it's usually easier to build a new habit tend to break down or change an old bad habit. So if you can get yourself used to using the proper way of writing in Spanish right from the beginning, then this will help you in the long run as well. Alright, that's it for this lesson. I hope you found this helpful. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. I would love to help you out. And as always, if you want to review this lesson or if you want to go into any other topic, you can always find all of the information that you need on my website, SpanishWithWes.com. I'm leaving a link in the description which you can click on, which will take you to this exact lesson. Alright, that's it for this one. As always, thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. For now, we're gonna say bye, or as we say in Spanish, adios.